Embrace your biblical privilege. And I have a white family there. They got the thumbs up, because we hear the negative connotation today of privilege. Every time you turn on the TV, we hear about privilege. And that privilege usually is towards white people, our European ancestors. That's the privilege. And so for this sermon, we're going to talk about the privilege, and something you should not be ashamed of. You should be happy that we have privilege. And you're going to learn about why we should have privilege, and be happy that we have privilege, and be proud of it, that we have privilege. Now, some of you, those maybe listening to on the internet, you may be like, what are you talking about? You're happy with privilege. That's evil, and it's wicked and everything. But just stay till the end of the message, and you're going to, I think, be in line with what I'm talking about. So let's talk about privilege. So we all know a privilege is a special right. If you look on the internet, encyclopedia or dictionary, and read what privilege is, they'll say a special right, an advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. That's what privilege is. Now, as I said, we are always being taught how privilege is evil, how it's bad, it's wicked, that you should be ashamed of your privilege because you were born in America as a white male or woman, and because of that, of our wicked past, you should be ashamed of your privilege that other races do not have. They were not able to have the same rights as we have, and so you should be ashamed of your forefathers because you have privilege. And we hear about white privilege more than anything else. Is we hear about that white privilege. We hear and you look at the TV, and you nonstop in the last several years hear about news commentators talk about how evil white people are and how privileged they are, and they have all these advantages because of the fact that you were born as a white male or woman. If we look at what white privilege specifically says, if you look on the internet, it says the societal privilege that benefits white people over non-white people in some societies, particularly if they are otherwise under the same social, political, or economic circumstances, with roots in European colonialism and imperialism and the Atlantic slave trade. White privilege has developed in circumstances that have broadly sought to protect white racial privileges, various national citizenships, and other rights or special benefits. So that's what, if you read on the internet, that's what white privilege is. We hear about how America was founded as a Christian country. And our enemies know that America was founded as a Christian country. And that country, America's, the history, the roots of that Christian country was intolerable to other religions and other people that were not Christians. And that these foreigners that now come in, they were not given the same opportunity as Christians were. And so you should be ashamed of your past. You should be ashamed of America, because white Europeans who were Christians were the only ones that had privilege in America. Recently, we hear about the CRT, critical race theory. We hear about books that are written, and we read about books that are being written about the critical race theory, which is the idea that America, from the very beginning, is a racist country. It was developed by white people, and non-whites were not able to share the same benefits as white Christians. You see Christian conservatives more and more trying to deflect that. They want to say, no, America was really for everybody. And so they're kind of ashamed of that past. And what I tell people when people say, you have privilege, I say, you are absolutely right. I have privilege. I am proud that I have privilege. I am proud that my God and the Bible that was written for our people gave me privilege. And the Bible was ordained for certain people, and a certain people with a history of having privilege. And some people may not really get that, but that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about our biblical privilege. We're going to talk about how God ordained a certain people to make sure that they had privilege. Because remember, if we read the definition of privilege, it was a favorable status for certain people, a certain group that were denied to other people. That's what privilege is. And so when we read the Bible and know the history of the Bible, we will see, yes, God gave privilege status to his people. So don't be ashamed of it. Be proud of it. God is very specific when he referred to his people Israel, when he said he was the God of Abraham, when he said he was the God of Jacob. He said he was the God of Israel. He identified Israel, his people, a peculiar people, his issue on the earth, his chosen people, my inheritance, and a holy people. God was being very, very specific with his privilege that he was giving to a certain people. So I tell people, embrace it. Be proud of it. Don't shy away from it. Don't be shameful of it. So let's look at biblical privilege. As I said, the Bible is very, very specific about this privileged status that he gave to his people. If we start looking at the Abrahamic covenant, the Abrahamic covenant was a promise, it was a blessing to a particular people, which was Israel. We all know that we are racially connected to the covenant people in the Bible, and we are a privileged people. If we understand the Bible, we understand our racial connection to the Abrahamic covenant. If we understand the history of the God's redemption to Israel, if we understand those basic tenets of the Bible, then we understand that, yes, we are privileged. Don't be ashamed of it. Be proud of it. I always tell people when someone tells you that and you admit, yes, I do have privilege, I'm proud of it, it's almost like they don't know what to say after that, because the theory is if you call someone you have privilege, then they're going to start being shyful of it. They're going to start being apologetic about it. They're going to say, no, I don't have privilege. I don't have privilege. They want you to be ashamed of your biblical privilege. They want to be ashamed of your racial privilege. They want you to be ashamed of that. And I tell people, don't do that. Be thankful that you have privilege. So, let's look at various passages in the Bible looking at about privilege, because that's what we're going to be talking about today, is privilege. So we're going to look at several passages in the Bible about privilege. And what I'm trying to look for is my clicker. So, excuse me. There it is. Okay. So, let's start out. We're going to do a lot of reading here. Certain passages in the Bible about a privilege to certain people. And these are just numerous ones that I've picked out. I know each one of you can pick out a lot of them. And so these are just some of the various passages in the Bible that we're talking about privilege. We're talking about a particular group that has the benefits, the promises, and the privileges to a certain people. Then yes, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Bible. So Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Now the Lord said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless them, and make thy name great. God is being very, very specific here. And thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And I'm underlying the specific parts where we're talking about privilege. Let's go to another one. Genesis 17, 2 through 7. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. God's being very specific. And Abram fell to his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. And I will establish my covenants between me and thee and thy seed after thee and their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. That doesn't mean just at that point in time is God making a covenant to his particular people. That particular people includes all their generations. It includes us as today. So again, the privilege, that's what we're looking at. Genesis 22, that in blessing will I bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in the seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because they has obeyed my voice. Look at Exodus 19:5. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. Again, God is being very, very specific regarding his privileged status that he is bestowing upon his people. Does that mean that other people are not blessed and not under the covenant? Absolutely not. Doesn't mean there's anything hateful. We're talking about privileged status, something that we need to be proud of, something we should not be ashamed of. Exodus 29:45. And I will dwell among the children of Israel and will be their God. Sounds pretty exclusive to me. Exodus 33:16. For wherein shall it be known here that I and thy people have found grace in thy sight? It is not in that thou goest with us, so shall we be separated, I and thy people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth. Again, we're going through a series of passages in the Bible where God is being very specific about bestowing privilege to his people. Leviticus 20:24 and 26. But I have said unto you, ye shall inherit their land, and I will give it unto you to possess it, a land that floweth with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, which has separated you from other people, and ye shall be holy unto me. For I, the Lord, am holy, and have severed you from other people, that he should be mine. Again, God is being very specific that he has given the land to Israel, he's giving it to his people, and he's separating them from other people. Leviticus 26:12. And I will walk among you, and will be your God, and ye shall be my people. Numbers 18:20. And the Lord spake unto Aaron, thou shalt have no inheritance in their land, neither shalt thou have any part among them. I am thy part and thine inheritance among the children of Israel. God is basically saying, Israel, my people, you are mine inheritance, no one else. He's being very specific. He's being very exclusive. He's not being inclusive to everybody. He's being exclusive. He is saying, you are mine inheritance, nobody else. Deuteronomy 7:6. For thou art a holy people unto Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 10:15. Only the Lord had a delight in thy fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, even you above all people, as it is this day. Deuteronomy 11:24 and 25. Every place wherein the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours. From the wilderness of Lebanon, from the river of Euphrates, even unto the uttermost sea shall your coast be. There shall be no man be able to stand before you, for the Lord your God shall lay the fear of you and the dread of you upon all the land that ye shall tread upon, as he hath said unto you. That is a specific mark. That is a specific indication of our people, where God is telling Israel, his people, that wherever you go, you will conquer that land. Wherever you go, no one will be able to defeat you. And that's a representation of our people. Our European ancestors, our white people, have always gone, wherever they have gone, they have always conquered other lands. They have always established civilizations. That is something our enemy wants us to be ashamed of. They want us to be ashamed of our history and our past, and something we should not be ashamed of. We are fulfilling the destiny that God has given to his people. Joshua 1:5. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Psalm 16:5. The Lord is the portion of mine inheritance, and my cup. Thou maintainest my lot. Again, God is telling his people, you are my inheritance. Psalms 47:4. He shall choose our inheritance for us, the excellency of Jacob, whom he loveth, Selah. Again, we are his inheritance. The same thing when a parent dies and they have in a will that says that it goes to my children, they automatically goes to their children by biblical law, from common law, even today's law. It goes to your children automatically if you did not have a will, because you are their issue, you are their blood, and automatically goes to them. And that's what God is saying here is all these blessings that I'm giving you, you are my inheritance. You're going to receive that. Sounds like privilege to me. Psalms 147, 1 through 2. And I love this part. It kind of goes with the song that we all know. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. Now we know from that passage, many of us and many of the identity movement understand that sides of the north talks about America, talks about the United States, talks about the fulfillment of the prophecy that God has said about the regathering place of Israel. Again, another indication mark that God was talking about thousands of years ago to our ancestors, that you will be fulfilling that someday. You will have that privileged status. It is particularly only to you and no one else. Psalm 147, 19 through 20. He showeth his word unto Jacob. Very, very specific. His statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He hath not dealt so with any nations. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. Only Israel gets the blessings. Only Israel gets the curses. Only Israel gets the judgments. Not any other race, but Israel, our people. Again, we're talking about the privileged status. This is their privileged status that we're talking about. Isaiah 43:1. But now thus saith the Lord, that created thee, O Jacob, and he that formed thee, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by thy name. Thou art mine. Matthew 10:6, where he talks about the disciples. And Jesus says, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Jesus is very specific that he's telling his disciples, go to the lost sheep of Israel. Go to all those of the Israelites and the tribes of Judah that was dispersed into Europe and all these other nations. Go to these people, our people that have been taken away from the various 7 invasions by Assyria and Babylon, that go to these places and only go to them and talk to them about Jesus and the gospel, and talk to them about all the promises that's mentioned in the Bible. God is making sure that he wants his privileged status to be continued to the next generation. Matthew 23, 37 through 40. Master, this is where the lawyer asks Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus says, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second unto it, which means it's just the same, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And we know from the Bible that the neighbor in Leviticus means your racial kindred people. That's what neighbor means. It doesn't mean someone that just moves across the street from you that's not your racial brothers and sisters. It literally means your racial kindred people. So when God talks about loving God and loving his people, it's very specific about privilege. The privilege that you have is only to our people. Ephesians 1 through 11. In whom also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestinated according to the purpose of him, who worketh all things after the counsel of his own will. James 1. This is the very beginning of the book. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. Again, only to a specific people is the gospel to go to. A specific people, our racial families, our racial ancestors. Peter 2, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that he should show forth the praise of him who hath called you out of darkness and to his marvelous light. God is telling us that we are a chosen people. We are royal. We are literally the sons and daughters of the living God. We have a great, beautiful past. We have a great family history. God tells us we are from a holy nation. We're a peculiar people, which means a great people, people that are set apart. And that's, again, a representation of our people. That's what our people are. We have always been separated. We have always gone to other lands and built civilizations. We have always obeyed God's laws. Even though we have sinned, God has always had mercy unto our people. And he's always directed us back to him. And so that, again, is very specific that God is telling to a certain family, certain people. Before we get to that, so we know that just from these, and I know everyone here, again, can go through the Bible and get 50, 60, hundreds of other passages in the Bible talking about a specific privilege that you're looking at saying, yep, God is talking only to Israel, only to our racial people. It was not for any other people. From the very beginning of Genesis to the very end of the Bible, it's always about a specific people, a racial people. And so again, with this privileged status, we should not be ashamed of it. We should not hide from it. We should not be scared to embrace this privileged status. That's what our enemies want us to do. It's the same thing if someone calls you a racialist, someone's called you a nationalist, they call you evil monster because you love your race and culture. They want you to be ashamed of it. And I say, they call you privileged? Yes, I have a privileged status. My forefathers and my God Almighty made sure that I have that privileged status. So we look at the Bible. We look at these different parts of the Bible. And we see that, we know from reading the history of the Bible that there were 7 invasions from Assyria and Babylon and took all our ancestors of Israel and the other tribe of Judah and scattered them into Europe. And that's where our people then went into. If you look and read anything regarding historical documents, it is confirmed not only in the Bible, but historical documents that the enemy do not want you to know talks about our people, that they are descended from Israel. So let's look at one historical document, the Scottish Declaration of Independence. This was written, it's called the Declaration of Arbroath of 1320. And it says it recognized that the Scots were Israelites when it states, in quote, our nation of Scots has been described in many publications, the crossing from the Greater Scythia by the Tyrrhenian Sea and the Pillars of Hercules, and living in Spain among the fiercest tribes for many years. It could be conquered by no one anywhere, no matter how barbarous the tribes. Afterwards, coming from there, 1,200 years from the Israelite people's crossing of the Red Sea to its home in the west. This is an official document from Scotland in 1320 where they recognize that the Scottish people, our people, came from Israel. We are the one and the same people. Again, we're talking about a privileged status. The Scottish Declaration of Independence is very specific of its privileged status to a certain people. We know that Ireland, for example, means the land of the Hebrews. We know Britain means the covenant people. And then we know that there's thousands and thousands of documents and markers all throughout Europe that confirms that our people is the lost tribes of Israel, the scattered tribes. So we're talking about embracing our privilege, and we're talking about our biblical privilege. We talked about how it states that in the Bible that God had given his status to specific people. So let's talk about America. Let's talk about America for a few minutes, about its privileged status. Because again, we're looking at certain people from the Bible where God talks about the privileged status that he is giving to Israel. And we know that privileged status continued throughout Europe. And we're going to talk about the privileged status of our people coming into America. There are, again, hundreds and hundreds of documents in the United States that talks about the privileged status of white Christians. Our enemies of today do not want us to be proud of our privileged status. They want us to be ashamed of it. They want us to deny ourselves our privileged status. They want us to be fearful to express that out into the open and by talking to people or putting our publications about their privileged status. They want to make it something negative, an evil connotation about that privileged status. And that's something that we should not do. So let's talk about America. America was built, it was designed, and it was ordained by God for his racial people. Yes, it was only to a certain people, our white forefathers. And we're going to look at documents to confirm that privileged status was only to our people. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's horrible, or that's just sad. Well, what we're talking about is the facts. And as a lot of people say, facts don't have feelings. We're talking about facts. We're talking about the historical significance of our people and the sacrifices that was given to our people in order to ensure that we have that privileged status. Don't be ashamed of it. So we're going to look at March 26, 1790. I think I have that on here. Was the first session of the U.S. Congress that limited U.S. citizenship as follows, quote, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that any alien being a free white person who shall have resided within the limits and under the jurisdiction of the United States for the term of 2 years may be admitted to become a citizen thereof, and application to any common law court of record. United States forefathers and the people was very specific what their design and their intent to our people was. It was to the white Christians that was founded, the Pilgrims and Puritans. They wanted to make sure that our people had a home, had a place that they could flourish, that they could bring the gospel to America and have a place for our people to come here and to grow and be inspired by the Word of God, but be around other racially connected people. They're sane people. And so the first U.S. citizenship that we just read was only to free white people. John Jay, writing in the Federalist Paper number 2, says, quote, "With equal pleasure, I have as often taken notice that Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people." Diversity is not our strength. It doesn't say that in there, but that's basically what he's saying. A people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar to their manners and customs, and who by their joint counselors, arms, and efforts, fighting side by side throughout a long and bloody war, have nobly established general liberty and independence. Again, he's talking about America was for a specific people. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall states, he was a Chief Justice from 1801 into 1835, states, quote, "No person, I believe, questions the importance or religion of the happiness of man. The American population is entirely Christian, and with us Christianity and religion are identified." America was a Christian country. It was a white country. It was not made, designed, or for the purpose of any other religion or individuals, racial individuals. 1840, the Supreme Court decision of United States versus Dow. The colonists were all of the white race, and all professed the Christian religion. If any person of a different color or professing a different religion had come into the colony, he would not at that time have been recognized as an equal by the colonists, or deemed or participating with them in the privileges of this community. There's that word again, privileges. Supreme Court saying other non-Christians or other racial aliens, you don't have the same privilege as white Christians. This country was not made or designed for you. It was made and designed for a particular people. Whites were not automatic citizens whenever they came, wherever they came from. Blacks were not citizens. Whites were automatic citizens wherever they came from. They were automatically they were citizens. Blacks didn't have the same privileges. They didn't have the same rights from states to states. But a white person from wherever country they came from in Europe, they came here, they automatically had those same rights. Wherever states they moved to, they had the same rights. It didn't matter. Whites or other blacks or other non-whites didn't have those privileges or rights. So they could go to one state, they went to another state, they could be denied those rights and privileges. America was, again, for a specific people. James Kent, Commentaries on American Law, in 1873, wrote, "In most of the United States, there is a distinction in respect to political privileges." Again, we're seeing that word again. Political privileges between free white persons and free colored persons of African blood. And in no part of the country, except Maine, do free colored persons, in point of fact, particularly equally with whites, and the exercise of civil and political rights. Again, historical documents talking about our country, our beloved America, was for a specific people. And if you was for those specific people, you had that privilege. That was the beautiful America that our people came and established. If we look at all the territories in North America up until 1863, specify that citizens consist of free white persons. And a lot of these notes I want to just let everyone know from my father, Pastor Thomas Raw, those that listen on the internet. America, Christian White Confused. He did extensive research about this subject. And I would, if anybody wants to get a copy, let us know. We can send that to you. But this talks about free white persons in all these territories. Indiana, Oklahoma, Orleans, Illinois, Missouri, Mississippi, Michigan, Alabama, Florida, Arkansas, Wisconsin, Iowa, Oregon, Minnesota, Utah, New Mexico, Washington, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Dakotas, Idaho, all of those states, territories, you had to be a free white person in order to reside there. We know about the Dred Scott decision from the U.S. Supreme Court in 1854 that ruled that Africans, whether slave or free, are not citizens of the United States. We read in 1892, the U.S. Supreme Court, Holy Trinity, I don't have that on there. 1892, Holy Trinity versus the United States, states, quote, if we pass beyond these matters to a view of American life expressed by its laws, its businesses, its customs, and its society, we find everywhere a clear recognition of the same truth. Among other things, note the following. The form of oath universally prevailing, concluding with an appeal to the Almighty, the custom of opening sessions of all deliberate bodies, and most conventions with prayer, the prefatory words of all wills, in the name of God. Amen. The laws respecting the observance of the Sabbath, with the great succession of all secular businesses, and the closing of the courts, legislatures, and other similar public assemblies on that day. The church and church organizations which abound in every city, town, and hamlet. The multitude of charitable organizations existing everywhere under Christian auspices. The gigantic missionary associations with general support aiming to establish Christian missions in every quarter of the globe. These and many other matters which might not be noticed add a volume of unofficial declarations to the mass of organic utterance that this is a Christian nation. That's from the U.S. Supreme Court in 1892. Again, reaffirming that America was a Christian country. It was a country for white Europeans. 1923, not that long ago. I don't think I have that on either. 1923, U.S. Supreme Court, United States versus Bhagat Singh Thine. Hopefully I got that right. Which is an American, he was an American veteran. In World War I, he sought to become a naturalized person by providing that he was Caucasian. And the court considered new anthropological studies that expanded the definition of the Caucasian race to include Indians. And the justices even agreed that the traces of Aryan blood coursed through Thine's body. But these technicalities availed him little. The court determined that Thine was not white in accordance to the understanding of the common man, and therefore could be excluded from the statutory court category of whiteness. So even up to 1923, the Supreme Court was saying, you're not a citizen, you're not white, you're an Indian, but you're not a white person. And because you're not a white person, you're not a citizen of the United States, even up to 1923. So we see from the documents, and there's many, many more that we could discuss, but this is just a few examples, that we were a blessed nation. We were a nation. America was a blessed nation because we were a Christian nation. We were a white-centered nation. America was founded. It was established. It was built for our people. It was not built for any other. And those were the facts. Everyone knew it. It was common knowledge. We all believe that America is the regathering place of Israel. And there are many, many people that may hear this for the first time on the internet. There may be many people that are aware of this and have recognized this. But that's why it's so important that us individually, those us in the church here, those that's maybe listening to us on the internet, looking at this historical documents about America being a white Christian country, there's nothing evil about it. There's nothing to be shameful about it. That is why it's so important that we continue to be recognize our privileged status. To recognize who we are. Recognize that we have a glorious past of America, a glorious past in the Bible about the privileged status. We as a church and those that are in the church here, we recognize that. The people in what we would call the Christian identity churches, they recognize that. They recognize the beautiful past that we have. That's why it's so important for us individually in the church body here, or those listening to us on the internet, to continue to come to church. Come to a Christian identity church. Come to a church where you can be around like-minded brothers and sisters that have the same beliefs as you do, that have the same acknowledgement of our history, that be surrounded by other people that are proud of who they are. Be proud of your blood. Be proud of your racial connection to those in the Bible. Those are the founding forefathers and foremothers. We need to be proud of that. So if those listening to us on the internet, if you're near a Christian identity church, you need to attend that church. If you're around here, you're 2 or 3 hours away, you need to come to church here as much as possible. Every 4 or 5, 6 weeks, you need to try to come to church. You need to constantly be around other people that will help inspire you, help you recognize the glorious past that our forefathers and foremothers gave us. We don't need to be ashamed of it. We know, just from what we've put on the screen here and in the Bible, that the Bible, from God himself, gave a special privileged status to Israel. He gave that special privileged people to our people. We are the same people. We're the same people, the same covenant people, the same people of Israel to the same people as today. We are those same people. Nothing separates from us. And in Israel and America, I think is very special because of the fact that both of those countries and the nationhood status were founded for a particular people. The privileged status was for a particular people. God gave that particular status, privileged status, to his people, Israel. And America gave that special privileged status to our people, the white Christians. Continuing that flow of promise all the way from the Bible. So in conclusion, yes, we have privilege. Don't be ashamed of it. Either if it's called white privilege, a peculiar people, if it won't be called a holy people, God's elect, a separate people, his chosen people, God's inheritance, is a gift from God and to his children. God has always dealt with his people from the beginning of time, biblical times, even to today's time. We have that special covenant from him. And when he told Abraham and Joshua that wherever their feet stood, whatever land they went upon, they would conquer it. That demonstrates that God has always showed privileged status to his children. So don't be ashamed of it. Embrace it. And thank God that we have it. And as that family, as on here, someone calls you, you got privileged status? Absolutely. I got privileged status. Thank God God gave me a privileged status. So when we go to bed at night, we pray, thank God for the mercies, the promises that he has given to us and our people, and the next generation. It never ends. So please bow your head. Dear Heavenly Father, again, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you that we can come here and recognize the great status that you have given us, this great privilege that you have given us, that you saw fit to ordain our people, the Israel people, our covenant people, and gave that same status throughout all the generations from Abraham to America. Gave a country to us that was for our people, for our posterity, for our next generation. Thank you for that you keep your promises.
Is always shining. There are no tears.